Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to a new Sunday edition of your weekday programme, The Daily Debate, here on Nile TV International for tonight. I'm your host, Nancy Sarah Barakat, and up for discussion in this evening's programme, we'll be taking a look at two important topics making headlines here in the region, the situation in Libya, as well as a look at the latest developments from Syria. During the first half of the programme, we'll be taking a look at a conference that started on Monday and went on until Wednesday, and that was held here in Cairo with Libyan officials and representatives from the country's numerous factions. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and Army Chief of Staff Mahmoud Hijazi attended the two-day conference along with a number of Libyan representatives. The conference concluded by underscoring four main principles to be respected in Libya's transition: the preservation of a united Libya, as well as the support for national institutions, non-interference by foreign bodies, and the maintenance of a civil state. Following the meeting, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry met with the head of the UN support mission in Libya, Martin Kobler, and presented these conclusions, stressing that all of Libya's factions should be engaged in the dialogue. What are the chances of the factions sticking to the agreement? Is it enough for a lasting solution? That's what we're going to be discussing in detail on the first half of the programme. Later on, though, we're going to be taking a look at the latest with regard to Syria, which has witnessed airstrikes launched by government and Russian forces on besieged Aleppo. However, a new deal has been negotiated, and the evacuation is supposed to be going on as we speak, of the rebel-held areas of eastern Aleppo, which ground to a halt on Friday after demands from pro-government forces that people also be moved out of two villages besieged by insurgents. Now, a Syrian rebel official and a government official said the evacuation has resumed, and two Shiite villages would be part of that evacuation, as well as the wounded from two border areas near Lebanon, as well as the east of Aleppo. Now, the United Nations Security Council was scheduled today to vote on a French-drafted resolution aimed at ensuring that UN officials can monitor evacuations from besieged parts of the Syrian city and the protections of civilians who remain. How do my guests evaluate the situation in Syria? Are they optimistic about the recent developments, and how and when can a final solution be reached? That's also up for discussion tonight. But as always, we like to shed more light on another story making headlines here in the country, and today we're focusing on President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's visit to the Ugandan capital. He has already concluded his one-day visit, where he held talks with President Yoweri Museveni at the presidential palace. The talks covered means of enhancing all-round cooperation in the areas of economy as well as trade. They also covered more Ugandan development projects to be established with Egypt's contribution, in addition to a set of regional and African issues of mutual concern. Spokesman for the presidential cabinet, Alaa Yusuf, said that President el-Sisi's visit came upon an invitation from his Ugandan counterpart. Now, Ambassador Mohammed al-Shazli, former Assistant Foreign Minister, joins us now over the phone to tell us more about his thoughts about the President's visit to Uganda. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Let me start off by just a recap of how important you believe this visit to be.
I think any movement in Africa has its importance. And this is a movement on the highest level, on the presidential level, after a long time of neglect for Africa, which we are reaping the results of today. Uganda is a very important country in the sense that it is one of the countries of the Nile Basin, which also controls the largest natural reservoir of the Nile waters, the Lake Victoria.
Right.
Uganda is a member of COMESA, which also Egypt is a member to COMESA, which is the largest economic and trade bloc in Africa. Also, Uganda is a part of the East African community, which also is quite an important organization in Africa. All these issues make Uganda an important partner for Egypt. Also, Uganda has also an important experience in combating terrorism with its war against the Army of the Lord, which is a notorious terrorist organization in Africa. So all these are topics for cooperation between Egypt and Uganda.
What would you say were the most important outcomes of this particular visit? We were told, or we heard rather, by the presidential spokesman that Egypt would contribute to a number of projects in Uganda as well.
This, I think, is a very important issue in the sense that it is not enough for the president to go on a visit for a day or two.
Right.
This visit must have concrete results that will contribute to the interaction between the two countries. The presence of Egyptian experts, the presence of Egyptian entrepreneurs, and the presence of Egyptian expertise and the facilitation of trade between the two countries. These are the things that really make the concrete result of the presidential visit, that make tangible effects on the relations between the two countries.
Right. I thank you very much, Ambassador Mohammed Al-Shazli, former Assistant Foreign Minister, for your time as well as your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, our first report for the evening and a closer look at the latest from Libya, as well as the conference that was held here in Cairo from Monday through to Wednesday. And then we'll be back to discuss that. Stay with us.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry discussed with head of the UN support mission in Libya, Martin Kobler, ways to support Libya in solving its political crisis. Following an official conference on the situation in Cairo this week, Cairo hosted a conference on Libya Monday through Wednesday this week with leading officials and representatives from the country's numerous factions. The conference concluded with a declaration of principles and 5 proposed amendments to the 2015 UN brokered agreement, which aims to create a unity government in the North African country. In an official statement on Thursday, the Foreign Ministry said that Shoukry presented these conclusions to Kobler, stressing that all of Libya's factions should be engaged in the dialogue. Kobler hailed Cairo's efforts to help resolve the conflict in the war-torn North African states, highlighting Egypt's key role in pushing the process forward. The declaration of principles to be respected in Libya's transition included the preservation of a united Libyan territory, support for national institutions, non-interference by foreign bodies, and the maintenance of a civil state. Libyan participants called on the Libyan National Dialogue Commission and the United Nations Support Mission in Libya to hold a meeting within 2 weeks to discuss the conference proposals and possible solutions to end the country's political crisis. After discussing political developments in Libya since 2014, participants in the conference concluded by proposing 5 amendments to the UN brokered 2015 agreement to guarantee its success in ending the violence and ongoing state of political, economic and humanitarian insecurity in the country. The proposed amendments were: first, amend representation inside the Libyan National Dialogue Commission in a way that balances all national factions in the country. Second, amend the authorities of the Libyan Army Chief Commander outlined in the 8th article of the 2015 agreement. Third, guarantee the independence of the Libyan Army as a non-partisan, non-political force in the country. Fourth, reform the Libyan State Council to include members of the Libyan General National Congress, a legislative body elected to a 2-year mandate in 2012 and replaced by Libya's current House of Representatives in August 2014. Fifth, restructure the Libyan Presidential Council and its system of decision-making.
Be the first to know. The news live at the site of the event. Information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, it's Nile TV. For ads on Nile TV, Egyptian Radio and Television Union, the economic sector, info@nileinternational.net, or call us on the following numbers.
عايز في البلد دي كل واحد يشتغل بضمير.
كلنا نشتغل، احنا نغير نفسنا بس.
الناس تعامل ضميرها وتعامل مرضي الله.
الناس تبقى كويسه مع بعضيها.
هيبقوا كويسين الناس.
كلنا خير ومصر كلها خير.
هي ام الدنيا. الشعب المصري ده طيب.
لو كل واحد ابتدى بس بنفسه البلد هتتصلح.
كل واحد يعمل ربنا وضميره. الناس تبقى حلوه كده مع الناس.
لازم اخلاق الناس تبقى كويسه.
نحب بعض. الاحترام.
ضماير الناس.
الاخلاق بس.
ان شاء الله ينصلح حالنا بقى.
نتقبل اراء بعض. هي الديمقراطيه. هي الديمقراطيه.
Egypt's culture has thousands of years of recorded history. In every major city, you'll find traditions that remain from the time of the pharaohs. Cruising on the Nile, Ramadan in Egypt, Eid, and also shopping. All have a different flavor. Explore Egypt on Nile TV International.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and joining me tonight for the first segment of our discussion is Dr. Mustafa Abbas, political analyst. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
You're welcome.
I wanted to start off by asking you of how you see the overall situation in Libya as it stands today.
It's better in one aspect and it's worse in another aspect. But before we delve into that, I think we have to understand why Libya is what it is at the moment. It is chaos. It is a warfare between and among tribes and political factions. Who is responsible for that? In my mind, the Western powers, including the United States, are responsible for this chaos.
How so?
Which let's face it, let's be honest. Libya is very important for the West, not because of the Libyans or because of the geographical situation or anything of the sort. It's because of the oil, the quality of oil that Libya has. And you know, and probably our viewers know, that Libya is rich in oil of high grade or high quality oil, which is used for aircrafts. It's used as fuel for aircrafts. That's why the West, France, United Kingdom, the United States, and the rest of the European Union states are very much interested in Libya. The pattern in Libya is, in a number of respects, similar to the pattern in Iraq, in a way, Syria, and the rest of the, what we call the problem zones in the Arab world. Here I will digress again a little bit, because when I lived in Austria, and when we asked as a non-governmental organization, because I was a member of a non-governmental organization, we asked the foreign ministry of Austria to at least condemn the bombing that took place in Libya and the number of casualties, including human casualties. They said, honestly, because that was a friend of mine, he said, Mustafa, honestly, we're not going to do that, because 35% of the fuel, airplane fuel that we get is from Libya, and we cannot actually do something of the sort because that will translate into economic damage to the Austrian economy. The same, of course, goes for England, the same goes for France, etc., etc.
It's interesting you say that, because some people would argue differently. They would say, well, wouldn't, if Libya is so important to the West, wouldn't its stability be more beneficial to them?
Well, stability, if it is in the hands of Gaddafi, and Gaddafi, capricious as he was,
right,
so he would give and withhold. So what they are interested in is just get the oil. And they used to get the oil after Gaddafi, even from factions, different factions. Either someone who has a tanker full of fuel would just send that to the middle of the sea, Mediterranean Sea for that matter, and sell it. So it's the interests that lie behind the chaos in Libya.
Right.
And of course, this is very dangerous for Egypt. Egypt cannot just fold hands and stand by and spectate.
Right.
We have to do something.
Right. What do you think, what were your thoughts on the two-day conference that was held here in Cairo and the outcomes of that?
The outcomes I really don't know, but the conference itself as an event is timely and it's necessary because, again, Libya is an extension of Egypt, and Egypt is an extension of Libya. I mean, the Libyans. I happen to be from Fayoum, and some of the families in Fayoum have half the family in Fayoum and the other half in Libya. So right. Libya and Egypt and the imaginary borderline cannot be obfuscated because Mr. Biko and Mr. Francis Biko and Mr. Sykes decided to just divide them. This is not the case. Right. We have to be very concerned and very interested in what happens in Libya, and of course we have no interest in siding on one side and leaving the other. We have to assemble those factions as we have in the last few days, and we try to reach a political settlement and achieve stability in Libya, because this is in our interest.
What would it take, though, for the Libyan factions to actually reach a tangible solution to the division in the country right now?
It would take of course, lots of negotiations, and that should be done by someone from the region, like Egypt. Right. Egypt is well situated to interfere and intervene both in Libya, because again, we can talk to the people in their own language. We know who they are, we know how they behaved, and again, remember that Libya now is similar to Libya when it was occupied by the Italians. Right. Divided into three major groups. Right. It's the same exact thing. So someone is, I know some people would accuse me of believing in a conspiracy theory, but unfortunately, on the ground, this is what's happening. We have factions in the three major regions in Libya, and again, it is in the interest of Egypt, it is in the interest of Tunisia, it is in the interest of Algeria, being contiguous to Libya, and of course the Sudan, to just intervene and try to do something for the sake of the Libyan people.
Right, I understand these are the external elements, but internally, what would it take for all the factions to unite, to realize, obviously, that there is more benefit in unity than in diversity?
Divide the cake evenly between and the basket amongst all of them.
Right, who plays that role, though?
I would imagine that again, Egypt is well situated to do that with the help and the cooperation of the United Nations.
Okay. Following the meeting that was held here in Cairo, the Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry met with the UN support mission in Libya, Martin Kobler. Now, do you know what the outcomes of that meeting was? And if not, what do you think were the areas of discussion?
I think this is proper because, again, let's face it, Egypt is more sided with the Haftar group. And the United Nations has designed and formulated this unity government in Libya, which does not really enjoy the support of all the factions. It enjoys the support of some factions in Libya. So again, it's in the interest of all Libyans to stick together, probably to the formula reached very hardly by the United Nations. I think it should be done. And again, divide the cake evenly between all the factions and tribes, there and then you probably would be able to bind them together.
Right. If I ask you just one final question, I mean, let me ask you about how important is Libya's security for the region, and that or that the region rather plays a great role in trying to keeping it into one cohesive country.
It is very important for Egypt, and again with the same importance for Tunisia, and to a certain extent for Algeria, and of course Morocco and Sudan.
Right.
Remember, again, there is a pattern. The pattern, different as it may seem, it's the same. The pattern in Iraq, the pattern in Syria, the pattern in Libya is the same. It is vying for the natural wealth of the region.
Right. If we look at the patterns, obviously the patterns, as you say, haven't been very successful. I mean, when we look at where Iraq stands today, when we look at the situation in Syria, even in Yemen, we're seeing great turmoil in these three countries, including in Libya. If the formula doesn't work, why do you think, if you believe in conspiracy theories, that this particular formula is used again and again?
It is used again and again to sort of deplete the whole region. Again, if we go by the same theory, the West is interested in oil or gas,
right,
or whatever minerals that you have in the region. It's in the interest of the West to have these factions and these tribes fight one another, divide and rule, fight one another until they actually surrender, back on their knees, and there and then they will be amenable to the dictates of the West.
But when that happens, and this is my final question, when that happens, does this not breed more terrorists and more terrorism, which in turn obviously affects primarily Europe, and then eventually will reach the United States?
It has reached the United States,
right,
at one time or the other. But the governments in these countries really do not care that much. They care about the interests. Just let me cite one thing. The Foreign Affairs Committee in the Parliament in the United Kingdom has probably 3 days or 4 days ago issued a report condemning Mr. Cameron, the former Prime Minister of England,
right,
because he was not he did not depend on right intelligence, that's what the report says, and he did not fully understand the situation. They take orders from the companies,
right,
the big transnational companies, and they just carry them out. They don't really care as much as you think about their people.
Right. Well, again, I'm just going to say that these are your opinions and your insights. And I thank you very much for them.
I claim them every time.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa Abbas, political analyst, for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, for our second segment of tonight's program, we're taking a look at the latest developments from Syria. Let's take a look at the following report.
A new deal has been reached to complete the evacuation of rebel-held areas of Syria's East Aleppo, which ground to a halt on Friday over demands from pro-government forces that people also be moved out of 2 villages besieged by rebels. Syrian rebel official Al-Farouk Abu Bakr, speaking from Aleppo to a news channel, said the deal comprised an evacuation from the 2 Shia villages besieged by insurgents, the evacuation of wounded people from 2 towns besieged by pro-government forces near the Lebanese border, and the full evacuation of rebel-held East Aleppo. A Syrian government official also said the stalled evacuation of Aleppo would resume alongside some evacuations from the 4 besieged towns and villages. The operation to evacuate fighters and civilians from the last opposition-held area of Aleppo was suspended on Friday, its second day, after pro-government militias demanded that wounded people also be brought out of Al-Fuqa and Kifraya, and protesters blocked the road out of Aleppo. There were recriminations on all sides, and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said Aleppo is now a synonym for hell. The chaos surrounding the Aleppo evacuation reflects the complexity of Syria's civil war, with an array of groups and foreign interests involved on each side. Aleppo had been divided between government and rebel-held areas in the nearly 6-year war, but a lightning advance by the Syrian army and its allies that began in mid-November deprived the insurgents of most of their territory in a matter of weeks. The Syrian Observatory said 8,000 people, including some 3,000 fighters and more than 300 wounded, had left the city in convoys of buses and ambulances in the evacuations that began on Thursday morning. Rebel officials say the numbers evacuated are much lower, with no fighters having left. The UN says around 30,000 people remain in the crowded enclave of rebel-held Aleppo, of whom a number would be taken to Idlib, which is mostly controlled by hardline groups, and the rest would go to government-held city districts. Turkey said Aleppo evacuees could also be housed in a camp to be constructed near the Turkish border to the north. For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Syria's most powerful ally, said he was working with Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan to try to start a new round of Syrian peace talks aimed at securing a nationwide ceasefire. A senior Syrian opposition leader, Riyad Hijab, said that he was willing to attend the talks if the aim was to set up a transition government. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said his administration would build safe zones to try to help civilians trapped in Syria's bloody conflict, an idea that President Barack Obama said would be too hard to enforce.
Very warm welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And joining me for tonight's second segment of the program is Ambassador Rifat Al-Ansari, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee at the People's Republican Party. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're going to be taking a look at the situation in Syria as a whole, but perhaps let's take a look at each element or the most important elements in the Syrian crisis today. And let's start off with how you view or your analysis of President Bashar al-Assad and where he stands in all this.
Great. I'll try to give you and the audience bullets of my analysis. As a matter of fact, recapturing Aleppo was a major accomplishment for Assad. This will consolidate his position in the western part of Syria.
Right.
Still, Assad is a little bit too weak to control the eastern part. His army are exhausted, tired, fought brutal fights for 5 years. They are less in numbers, so he cannot do that. The second part is Assad have a very ambitious announcement and plan that he said after Aleppo he is going to liberate all of Syria. This cannot be done right now. He lacks forces and he lacks the power, despite of the air support from Russia, of the ground support from Iranian and Hezbollah militias in the ground. Still, he lacks this. He cannot fulfill his part. Assad was very keen to liberalize Aleppo before the arrival of Trump and his administration.
Right.
Trump and his administration, they are expected to change the policy, the American policy, vis-a-vis or towards Syrian file. Especially that Trump said several times that he is going to, he has no problem with the continuation of Assad regime, but he has a problem with Daesh. So they are expecting that this will be a big positive part of the arrival of Trump. The fourth part of Assad, I wanted to say that recapturing Aleppo was on the expense of the humanitarian situation.
Right.
The Assad had to go through a random killing, seizure of the city that deprived citizens before the fighting militias, deprived them from food, water, medicine, whatsoever. And I believe that this is going to affect the future of the living together ethnics and mosaic of Syria in the future, because Syria is composed of Sunnis, Shiite, Alawite, Kurds, Christians, Druze, and they were fighting each other because each one of those ethnics were a part of a segment of the fighting. So this is going to affect very negatively in Syria. And I believe here, whether Assad will remain or will be out, and this will come in our analysis, whatever will be left of Syria will be a memory of a nation, and whatever will be left of the Syrian people will be some people, because half of the population had been immigrated or internal or outside, moved outside of Syria, and they are having 320,000 killed, plus almost 500,000 injured. So this is going to be a trauma in their memory to live together after that.
Right. This is a very grim outlook at the future of what the future
I'm talking
has.
reality.
Right. For Syria, perhaps it is reality, perhaps it's a little bit harsh, but what about the opposition? The opposition, as we know it, seems to be very divided, seems to have no clear leader, and yet its existence is somehow important. Tell me a little bit about how you see the opposition's existence in all this.
Let me tell you the following. When you said divided, I would say incoherent. There is no harmony. Nobody knows who is the moderate position, who is the hardliner position, who are the jihadist position. As you said, there are no leader. So this led to two things. Number one, this incoherence led to weakness, and the incoherence and the weakness led together for the loss of Aleppo. The opposition now, they are existing in a small geographical area. That's why they are condensed. This geographical area mainly is the Idlib province, plus some isolated pockets around Damascus, Aleppo, and Homs.
Right.
So they cannot really move easily, and they cannot have a proper way of military resistance. Plus, they are lacking already the foreign military aid, so they don't have a lot of space to go. Their influence became less, their negotiating power became less, and that explains why the opposition agreed, even just before the liberation of Aleppo, agreed to go to Geneva once again, despite that they were refusing for that, to go and to start negotiations with Assad's regime. And they even agreed to participate in the suggested initiative from Russia and Turkey to have negotiations, where Russia promised to pressure Assad's regime and Turkey promised to pressure the opposition and also Daesh in order to reach a peaceful solution.
Right.
So,
who goes to the talks? I mean, if the opposition is not clear, if they're so divided that it's not clear who are, if you will, the good guys and the bad guys, who goes to the talks?
That's the dilemma in the Syrian conflict, that you cannot say who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, and already it's mishmashed opposition where each one is going differently. And this would lead us to the jihadists and mainly to ISIS.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the role that ISIS or Daesh plays in all this.
ISIS still up till now it's a capable military force that can fight, despite of the pressure and the military pressures and challenges. Still they are, especially that they are holding strategic positions in all the eastern part. Mainly in Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor. And they are having still a good military capability that can re-establish the military fight, and they are still, despite that all media are talking that they are not having supplies, they are still having good supplies. From where, this is another thing. What I wanted to say, that Daesh believes that Aleppo is not the end of the war will continue.
Right.
And that's the main thing. In order to do this, Daesh has to, now, a new strategy, they have to support the opposition. And they want to support the opposition, not because they like the opposition, no. But if Assad will finish the moderate opposition, as we are calling it, he will turn into Daesh with full strength, and they don't want to do that. They wanted the opposition to be strong with a military struggle and a thorn in Assad's side. So they will try to help them, especially through breaking the supplying military lines of Assad, and this would explain why immediately they recaptured Palmyra. And recapturing Palmyra is near from the supply lines, military supply lines of Assad's forces. So they will try their best to help, despite that they didn't do before, but in their interest, they will do that.
Right.
That's my way of looking at it.
But the fight against Daesh is a long-going fight. It's one that is happening in Iraq and is one that is happening in Syria. And as you say, it seems to be an ongoing cycle. Will they now try, in one way or another, to sort of infiltrate the whatever other factions that exist now, or try to create some sort of unity or some sort of cooperation with them, and but hence will then the moderate opposition no longer be moderate?
As I said, it's in their interest to support the moderate opposition.
Right.
The moderate opposition is in a desperate situation now, so they are ready to cooperate with the devil. If this devil will be Daesh, let it be.
Well, why can't the devil be Assad?
Both.
Right.
But who is supporting? Of course, if ISIS is supporting moderate opposition, they will cooperate with it. If Assad is supporting moderate opposition, which will never happen, they will coordinate with it.
Right. Why do you think, though, if we go back to Assad, why do you think he has such a firm stance as to how he should continue on with the war in Syria? I mean, why isn't he more, if you will, lenient or more malleable, if you will, when it comes to negotiations? Do you think he feels that he has the upper hand because he has the support of certain countries?
His position now, with the Russian air support, with the ground Iranian different militias and Hezbollah different militias, he started gaining ground. And this is giving him more power, giving him a power influence in negotiations, and giving him a power in putting the upper hand.
Right.
So it's very obvious now who is doing what, for what reason.
Right. Well, what about Russia? Russia's role in this has been somewhat, it has been clear support of al-Assad, yet it has come under immense international pressure and at times, or a lot of times, condemnations for its airstrikes, particularly in Aleppo. How do you see Russia's stance in the war in Syria?
Let me tell you something, a lot of people, they are not paying attention to it. Russia put a rule that Moscow will be against the principle of changing political regimes by military actions. And the last regime they allowed to happen was Gaddafi's regime.
Right.
So they insisted in a hesitation moment and a weakness part and involvement of the American administration in other parts, they took the opportunity and they entered to Syria. Number one, to prevent the changing of the regime by force. Number two, Russia now is trying to gain the internal prestige and to get the international image by being there. Russia is part of any region, not just the Middle East. Russia is trying to be, again, the Soviet Union superpower. And in this, they are doing it with a very good strategy. Their involvement airstrikes only.
Right.
So with a very little power show, and compared to Afghanistan, for example, this is 20 times like this. And with the presence, they wanted to be there internationally, to be said, Russia is the main player in this area or in other areas. The last thing is in the Middle East, since the 80s, Russia had been out of the region, except air base in Laziquia and the naval base in Tartus. So it wanted to have a foot in this region. And this region is going to be the hottest region, I think, in the coming 10 to 15 years coming in. So in order for them to have a say, they have to be present. So that's the most important for Russia. What they are doing, how they are striking, it doesn't matter. But in the meantime, they are always keeping the balance. So when they were evacuating the civilians in Aleppo with the militias and their families, when the Iranians stopped this evacuation and were trading them with the to free the two villages of Shiite where the opposition is holding against, Russia intervened. This was yesterday. Russia interfered today, and it forced Iran to let the deal of the evacuation go, and even apologized on behalf of Iran.
Right. Before we get into what Iran benefits from being part of this war or of this equation, the other major power in all this, obviously, is the U.S. Now, the U.S. position right now, especially since we're seeing a transition, doesn't seem to be very clear. How do you see the U.S. position, and how do you see it changing under the new President Donald Trump?
I said that in one program before. I said my estimation or evaluation that Barack Obama's administration was going to try to fulfill the agreement with the Russians. The Russians, they don't want to do that. They wanted to do it with the new administration. And they will try to intensify the attacks on Daesh and to lead the alliance in this. But so far, I think the United States is failing to do that. And definitely the Russians are waiting for Trump to come. Trump has a different intentions and different directions, and his administration will fulfill his intentions.
Right. So do you think that a U.S. foreign policy or policy towards Syria in particular under Trump will be totally different than that?
Yes, as I said, Trump has no problem with the existence of Assad regime. Trump has a problem with Daesh, and that's why it's going to really concentrate on coordinating with the Russian part, and this will decide the future of Syria. But I wanted here to say that future of Syria, unfortunately and sadly, the Syrian people will not be part of the equation of deciding the transitional process and the peaceful agreement and the political negotiations.
Right.
Because they are not there. They are not factor anymore. It became internationalized, and they have to accept that since the internationalization.
I wanted to ask you, because obviously throughout the past 5 years, as the Syrian war has sort of unraveled, there was always talk about what we're seeing today on the ground as being some sort of new Cold War between Russia and the United States being played on Syrian soil. Do you believe there's an element of truth to that? And again, do you believe that when Trump comes, and with obviously all that's going on and sort of warming up towards Russia, then that will cease to exist?
Let me tell you something. Nobody can tell what Trump is going to do exactly, but at least there are some indications.
Right.
Trump will need 100 days to decide in the different files what he is going to do. And one of the files will be the Syrian file. So if we are talking about Trump needs 100 days, if there will be an understanding and a coordination between the Russian and the American parts, it will go into a transitional period process. I believe this process will take about 18 months. 18 months in order to settle down the whole civil war, in order to put a new constitution, in order to go for new elections. So if we calculate it, I would say from right now up till October 2018, Assad is staying.
Right. Do you think that the international community, though, has really looked into, because a lot of countries have supported that Assad should leave, should no longer be part of the equation, he has too much blood on his hands, etc., etc. But do you think they have all looked at the day after Assad leaves?
Now, this is no longer precondition.
Right.
Not for the Turks, not for the Europeans, despite of here and there some statements, but it's no longer a condition for that. Let me tell you something. The Iranians are also there on the ground. And if we are talking about Iranians, let me remind people that Iran or Khomeini's regime is paying back the debt to Syria. Syria was the only Arab country in the Arab world who was standing beside Iran in its war with Iraq in the 80s.
Right.
So they are paying back the debt of the father to the benefit of the son. Number two, Iran wanted to be a part of the solution in any regional conflicts. And they are very proud, and they are announcing it, they are not hiding it. They are already involved in Yemen, they are involved in Libya in a way, they are involved heavily in Iraq, they are heavily involved in Syria, so they wanted to do that. And they did this, and they used it skillfully to negotiate with the American administration the nuclear agreement with the United States and the other 5 Western countries. So they are always holding those things as cards. But if we look from the other side to Turkey, for example, Turkey mainly, they are after the Kurds. It's its own interest. And they wanted to hit the Syrian Kurds and to prevent any cooperation, coordination between the Syrian, Turkish, Iraqi, and Iranian Kurds. So they are after the Kurds because the Kurds are the main thorn on the back of the Turkish government. So it is very important also for Turkey to be present in the area, in the region. And they are playing the role of the moderate democratic country that's having the humanitarian role, that they are doing it with the Syrian refugees, despite that they are having a real dictatorship inside without any freedom. And also, they are not just playing this role vis-a-vis the West, but they are using this as a card when it comes to negotiations with the European Union. If you remember last time we were talking, right, I told you that they are using it to pressure the European Union in order to be a member, or at least to have a free access to European citizens.
Right, because we're running out of time, and after we've mentioned all these different elements in this very complex equation, what are your evaluations of the situation overall and how it's going to be playing out?
Aleppo is not the last military battle. War will continue, but probably with different shapes. Assad is going to stay at least till the end of 2018. Others, they are talking about his term will finish in 2021, but I don't think so. We have to deal, if we are talking about it, we have to deal with the crisis or the conflict in 3 aspects, but in order. We have the whole European or international community has to deal with the humanitarian aspect, first of all, to stop these atrocities, to stop the hunger, to deal with the Syrian people whom they are dying, and goes on. When we reach this, we should talk about a ceasefire and military disengagement between all parties.
Right.
When this is reached already, we will start the negotiations between the different parties in order to reach a political solution and a peace agreement.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rifat Al-Ansari, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee at the People's Republican Party. It was a pleasure having you with us. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the programme. Do join us again tomorrow, same time, same place here on Nile TV International. I'm Nancy Sarah Barakat, wishing you all a very good evening. Thank you very much.